Today we're going to be looking at a Pioneer DJM S9 that has a loud buzzing noise on its XLR output. The usual cause of XLR output issues, and indeed many other problems in recent Pioneer mixers, is the fact that Pioneer like to design in tiny non-resettable fuses all over their products. As pointed out in this Pioneer service note, it's likely to be this 1A fuse in series with the hot conductor of the XLR output. We have to get quite deep inside the mixer to get at the fuses, but the S9 is one of the easier Pioneer mixers to get apart, so let's get started. First you have to remove the knobs and faceplate from the fader section of the mixer. I explained how to do this in an earlier video, so take it away, me.
So firstly, we need to remove all the knobs from the lower section of the mixer. The rotary and Q slider knobs can simply be pulled off, but the line fader and crossfader knobs have a locking mechanism called P-lock to stop them coming off accidentally, and will probably break if you just try to remove them like a regular knob. To remove them the proper way, use a pointy object such as a ballpoint pen to push up on the white plastic part and then remove it. Next, remove the main body of the knob, and finally the little plastic clip. It's all a bit fiddly, but these knobs really stay put, even in the hands of the most clumsy turntablist. Once you have all three fader knobs removed, remove the 6 screws holding on the faceplate and put it to one side. Before you do anything else, remove the 2 bumpers at each side of the crossfader and put them somewhere safe. You'll lose them otherwise. It's also advisable to put a piece of tape over the spare bumpers to stop them falling out too.
Once you've got the faceplate off, you also have to remove the 4 screws on the sides of the mixer, 2 on each side. These 3 screws on the rear of the mixer will also have to be removed. Then finally there are 4 screws in the fader section to remove, located here, 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 and under the left input fader. The left input fader will therefore have to be removed. Again, I went over this in a previous video.
Each fader is held on with 3 screws. The middle screw is recessed about 1 inch down. The cable will also need to be removed, and then the fader can simply be lifted out.
Now that the fader is out, we can get at the final screw, which is here, and then the entire top section of the mixer can just be gently lifted off. It's probably a good idea to remove the 2 flat flex cables so we can move the top section somewhere else. The board holding the XLR fuses is underneath the input board, so it will have to be removed first. This is done by taking out the screws holding in the channel 2, channel 1, mic and aux input connectors, then unscrewing and removing this tension bar thing, then removing the 2 screws from the board. After gently unplugging the ribbon cables from the front and this additional ribbon cable at the back, the board can simply be removed, allowing access to the main board. The fuses are these things here just in front of the XLR connectors. Testing these with a cheapo multimeter shows no continuity whatsoever, so just as we suspected, they have blown and will need replacing. It is perhaps easier to solder a new fuse on top of the old one, but I'm going to remove the old ones just to keep things neat and tidy. The way I normally do this is to melt a large blob of solder on one side of the component, then quickly hop over to the other side while the solder is molten and just flick the whole component off. You have to be careful not to damage any nearby components when you do this. Pioneer clearly don't want you replacing the fuses because they really pat the components in tight around them. Anyway, once that's done, we have to remove the old solder from the pads using some solder braid, then clean the old flux off using isopropyl alcohol and a paper towel. I wasn't able to find the exact model of fuse Pioneer put in the mixer, so I'm just going to replace it with one of these 1A 1206 sized IC protection fuses manufactured by Little Fuse. I'll put a link to the product page in the video description. The way I solder small surface mount components like this is to melt a blob of solder onto one of the pads, then while keeping it molten, slide the component into place, then solder the other pad. Again, you have to be very careful not to damage any of the surrounding components. Once both fuses have been replaced, it's just a case of reassembling the mixer by doing everything in reverse and testing the XLR outputs.